Good afternoon, and welcome to the fourth Wednesday Professional Development for October 2024. My name is Steve Kirsch, and I'm the District Science Specialist for middle school. This professional development is a little different than most. There's not one topic, but several smaller topics that I'm going to cover during the session. Most of them are in response to things that people asked for during the September 20th in-service day. The first thing we're going to talk about are some ways for helping struggling students. The second thing is integrating literacy into the science classroom. And then briefly we're going to touch on CPALM's tutorials. And then I've included a very short, less than 2-minute video giving you a way that you can use word walls in your classroom. Almost every teacher struggles with coming up with ways to help their students who are struggling with the content that we're teaching. I am not going to try to give you everything that you could do to help them. I just want to touch on two different aspects of helping struggling students. The first strategy I wanted to touch on is scaffolding. Scaffolding is a technique we can use in our classrooms where we provide temporary support to students as they try to accomplish tasks, learn new concepts, or demonstrate mastery of what we want them to know. An example of this might be if you were giving a reading passage to your students and you had a very low-level reader. For that particular student, you might give them the same passage, only written at a lower level. AI is a great way to get the text rewritten to this lower level for them. Another idea might be for that student, you might give them a list of vocabulary words that they can use as they read through the passage. One of the most important things to keep in mind when using scaffolding is that scaffolding is meant to be temporary. So if a student needs a scaffold to accomplish a task, over time, we're hoping that that student will build the skills they need to no longer need that scaffold. So you should slowly wean them off the scaffolding as time goes by. If you find that the scaffold needs to stay in place, then maybe you need to explore whether that student needs a 504 or an IEP to make that accommodation permanent. From a teaching perspective, scaffolding doesn't require you to create a new or different assignment. It's just modifying what you're using with everybody else. The second method of helping struggling students I wanted to talk about today is the read to accommodation. These days, many students have read to as an accommodation on their 504 plans or their IEPs. Essentially, this means that they get their tests, both the questions and answers, read aloud to them. It's important to keep in mind that if this is an accommodation on a student's 504 or IEP, then you are legally required to comply and provide them with the accommodation. I understand how difficult this can be to do in a regular classroom setting. After all, very few of you have a second person in the room who can read to some students while you're administering a test and monitoring the rest of the class. There's a couple of methods I've seen teachers use with some success. One method is to pull a small group of the students who needs the tests read to them to one part of the room. When doing this, it's important that you pull them into a spot in the room and you stand in such a way that you can read to them while monitoring the rest of the room. Now, I do understand this is not the best way of providing the accommodation. It does single out the students that are having the test read to them. Additionally, the rest of the class can hear while you're reading to those students, which means that they're getting an accommodation that they really aren't supposed to. Another method that I've seen used quite effectively is to have your tests on Schoology. When you do this in Schoology, it allows you to record audio for the questions and answers. When students take the test, they can put on headphones and they can just click a button and it will read to them, which frees you up to not be reading to them individually. And in some cases, it makes the students more comfortable using the accommodation. A couple things to keep in mind is that when you use this accommodation, you still need to monitor the students because Schoology doesn't provide a means of locking down the browser and students could open another window. So you need to be keeping an eye on them. The biggest deterrent I hear to using Schoology for testing is the lack of computers. And I completely agree with you. But keep in mind that when you're doing this, not every student has to take the test on the computer. You could be giving the test in the way that you always do, just using computers for the students that have the read to accommodation. This can significantly lower the number of computers required to do this. During our recent in-service day, several teachers asked about the possibility of adding audio to the middle school test bank questions available in the Secondary Science Conference group on Schoology. This way, if you were making an assessment in your class, you could pull the questions from these banks into the assessment you're making, and they would already have the audio in there for the students. I have been working on this since the in-service day when I've had time. I have almost all of quarter 2 done for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Keep in mind that if you're using these banks, they're not designed to be ready to go test. They're just banks of questions. You should pick and choose the ones you want to use, and you may need to add some questions of your own to fill out the assessment that you're making. You will need to record your own audio for the questions that you add. In the next couple slides, I want to go over very briefly how it is you would go about pulling questions from these assessment banks into the assessments that you make. The first step in importing questions with the audio embedded in them is to go into whatever course you want to use and to add an assessment. You do this by clicking on Add Materials and then choose Add Assessment. I recommend you build an assessment in one class. Once you have it all done, you can copy it to any of your other classes that you want to use it for. Once you've created the assessment, the second thing you want to do is to click on the tab that says Questions, which you can see here with the top red arrow, and then you're going to select Add from Item Bank, which is the second arrow you see on the picture below. Next, you're going to click on Group and then select Secondary Science Conference Group. Once you get into the Secondary Science Conference Group, you're going to choose the folder that says Middle School Test Banks, select the grade level you want, and then select the standard you are looking for. You can add the questions with or without audio for the ones that audio is available. You can select individual questions, or you can just add all of the ones that are in the bank. I find what's easiest is usually just to add all of the ones in the bank, and then you can look at them later and delete the ones you don't want. You can go back and do this again and add from a second standard into the same assessment. In order for this to work, I've had to make everybody an admin in the Secondary Science Conference group. Please, please, please do not delete the course. If you decide you don't want to be part of it, just unjoin it. Don't delete it because that deletes it for everybody in the district. Also, for any of the resources that are in there, please don't edit them in the group. Copy them to wherever it is you want to use them, and then make any edits that you want. The second area I wanted to talk about was integrating literacy into the science classroom. So, why do we need to integrate literacy? When you look at state tests and you look at scientific articles that students are likely to be exposed to throughout their lives, they're going to be very wordy. And for students to be able to take on these wordy questions, answers, articles, they're going to need literacy skills to be able to break them down. Also, the science vocabulary that we use is very difficult compared to the other subjects that students are learning in school. We need to equip them with skills that help them figure out the meaning of the words they see. For example, looking at prefixes and suffixes, using context clues, and other skills like that are going to help them try to be able to figure out words that they may not know. Another thing that several teachers have asked for is the inclusion of articles into the maps to go with each of the units that we're teaching the students. What I've done is I've taken the area that used to just list context-dependent sets in the maps, and I've expanded them to say literacy resources. This will have the context-dependent sets as well as any articles that I can find that relate to that topic. So far, I've gotten this done for most of quarter 2. I will continue to try to expand this and work on the other quarters as well. The next area I wanted to talk about are CPALMS tutorials. For those of you who don't know, CPALMS is an online website that was developed by the Florida Department of Education, and they continue to maintain it. It provides resources, tools, and information to help K-12 teachers throughout Florida. This includes all subject areas. You can access it by going to cpalms.org. In recent years, they have updated it so that you need to log in to be able to view and use the materials that are there, but you can do this with a single sign-in login that we use for most everything else in this district. One of the things that they offer on there are tutorials. These tutorials can help with instruction. They can also be used for remediation. There have been some CPALMS tutorials in our maps for a while now. But what I did recently was to go through the CPALMS site and figure out all of the different tutorials they had. I did this by putting them all into an Excel spreadsheet. You can access this Excel spreadsheet if you go into the Secondary Science Conference group on Schoology. And as you see with the arrow pointing on the right there, there's a purple folder entitled CPALMS Tutorials. I uploaded my Excel spreadsheet, which lists every tutorial they have and gives you a link to them. I will be getting these added to the map, but it's going to take me a while to get all of them put in there. The last thing I want to talk about is using word walls. As I've gone to classrooms throughout the district, I've seen lots of teachers using word walls in their classrooms. If you don't know, essentially a word wall is just an area in your room where you put all of the key vocabulary terms that you're using. What it does is allows the students to be exposed to them on a regular basis. You can use word walls in lots of different ways. They're not just meant to be a static display. For example, you could pull words off them and have students try to identify them. There's games you could play with them, lots of different ways. If you just Google using word walls, you'll find lots of different strategies. The video that we're going to watch next covers one way that you could potentially use these in your classroom.
WordWall is a great strategy to get your classroom working together and moving around. To make your word wall, print and cut out some vocabulary terms and definitions. Place a Velcro dot on the front side of each term and on the back of each definition. Put the terms onto a bulletin board or other highly visible area. To get started, give each student 2 answer sticks and pick a student to go first. The starting student pulls a definition and reads it out loud to the class. The class members hold up a stick if they know the correct matching term. Students are called on one by one until someone gives the correct term. Students lose a stick every answer, whether right or wrong. When someone answers correctly, the starting student velcros the definition to the correct term on the word wall and switches places with the student who got it correct. This process is repeated until all the vocabulary words are completed.
I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email them to me. In order to get the PD points for this, you must do 2 things. First, if you haven't done so already, please register in BizPlus for this course. That must be done before 4 p.m. on Wednesday, October 23rd. After that, it won't allow you to register any longer, and you won't be able to get the PD points for this. Second, you must complete the Microsoft Forms activity before 8 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, October 24th. This is a very short activity, but it's essentially the way that I'm going to be able to take attendance and give you the credit for doing this. This PowerPoint will be uploaded to the professional development folder in the secondary science conference group in Schoology, so you can access it there. You can access anything in it or these links. You can go into the email I sent, which will have the links to both register and to complete the forms. Have a great day.